Good morning, good afternoon, or night. This is Mr. Tales coming at you with the video cast for the upcoming Progressive Era test next week. I hope we are preparing. So take out a writing utensil, take out a loose leaf sheet of paper or a notebook. Make sure you're writing everything down because then there's a better chance that it'll be in your cranium than just if you're listening to this or watching this. All right. So make sure you're writing everything down. You can forward, you can rewind, you can pick it up in any other place if you don't finish the whole thing. Just take those notes. I have the Progressive Era board in back of me. All right. I have my National Parks Yellowstone hat for when we talk about Theodore Roosevelt and the national parks. So let's let's go. We're going to start the test by discussing the political concerns that led up to the Progressive Era. So we're going to talk about the shaping politics during the Gilded Age that will eventually lead to the Progressive Era and those three progressive presidents: Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson. So the first question: describe the two political concerns that shaped politics during the Gilded Age. Describe the two political concerns that shaped politics during the Gilded Age. So one political concern was the spoils system. We talked about the spoils system because the main component of the spoils system was patronage, right? Now, we know about the voter fraud, we know about the corruption, but patronage was really the main part of it and also a key term on your quiz. So, although workers cannot perform in certain jobs, they received them through patronage because they showed political support for corrupt politicians. The example that we spoke about in class was that court reporter who showed political support was given a job as a court reporter, and he didn't know how to read or write. He was an illiterate. And he was given that job anyway. Now, we know that he did not do a good job, but he was given that job anyway through patronage. So that's the spoils system and patronage. So that is one political concern. The second political concern was that big business was not being regulated. So the lack of regulation of big business was a problem. So Americans worried about the power of the rich, and they feared bankers, industrialists, and other wealthy men, and they feared that they were controlling politics at the expense of the public good. And many of these big businesses, they were forcing smaller businesses out, and this eliminated competition. And that was one of our discussions earlier in the year as well. Because when you eliminate competition, you could raise your prices. You don't have to improve the product as much. So competition is a good thing. And these big businesses, these railroad barons, these steel kings, wealthy oil men, they were the ones that were trying to eliminate competition. So those were the two political concerns: the spoils system and the lack of regulation of big business. And just describe those two to me. The second question: how did muckrakers try to influence public opinion? I need 3 specific examples. So the first part is easy. Muckrakers used the press to turn public opinion against corruption. So they used the power of the press. Remember, everything was newspaper and books back then. The political cartoons were printed on the printer press. Okay, so the press, that's what the muckrakers used to turn public opinion against corruption. And for your specific examples, I need the name of the muckraker, I need the type of press they used, and who or what they exposed. So I need 3 muckrakers, who and what they exposed, and what form of press they used. So I always start off with Thomas Nast. We did the political cartoons in class, so I'd like talking about him a little first. So he did political cartoons, that's the press, and he depicted city bosses such as Boss William Tweed. All right, no Boss William Tweed's cronies. We knew he was in the pockets of pretty much everyone, from the mayor to the journalist to the police officer, so on and so forth. Uh, here's two, but for the price of one. All right. Jacob Riis and Lewis Hine. They were both photographers and writers. They provided shocking images of slum life and hardships of children. This is one answer. Jacob Riis and Lewis Hine, two people, one answer. They were photographers and writers, and they provided shocking images of slum life and the hardships of children. So that's our second one that you can choose. Ida Tarbell, she targeted the unfair practices of big business using her magazine, McClure's Magazine, and she attacked the unfair practices of big business, especially John Rockefeller's Standard Oil. All right, J. Rockefeller Standard Oil is who she really went after in her magazine, and I believe that's why that was one of the trusts to be busted when Theodore Roosevelt became president, because he read McClure's, and she really hit Rockefeller's Standard Oil. Then Sinclair, everyone's favorite. All right, he revealed gruesome details about meatpacking when he wrote The Jungle. So talked about the rats in your sausage, right? And dyeing the meat a pink color to make it look fresh. Meanwhile, it was very rancid. So he called the meatpacking industries out using his book The Jungle. Lincoln Steffens. This is the fifth. Remember, you only need three. This is five. I give you five. You give me. But Lincoln Steffens, he reported on corruption in city government when he wrote The Shame of the Cities. Okay, reported on corruption in city governments when he wrote The Shame of the Cities. All right, number three. So this is where we get into our progressive president. So we had all of the muckrakers, and now the progressive president is going to try to put certain things into law. And we're going to start with Theodore Roosevelt and his square deal. All right, so Roosevelt did away with bad trusts that destroyed competition. So he did away with the bad trusts that destroyed competition. That is one accomplishment. That when he took down the United States Steel from J.P. Morgan after he bought it from Carnegie. After J.P. Morgan bought his steel, Carnegie Steel, he turned it into United States. Theodore Roosevelt busted that up. He also busted up, as we talked about, the Standard Oil. He busted up tobacco, among many others. So he did away with us that destroyed competition. He outlawed rebates, giving the interstate commerce power to set railroad rates. All right. So he outlawed rebates, giving the interstate commerce power to set railroad rates. So that's two. Number three, very important. So important. He supported laws such as the Pure Food and Drug Act, which strengthened procedures for food and medicine. So inspection procedures for food and medicine. Now they had to put all the ingredients on the labels. They had to give you directions and warnings on medicine bottles. Okay, and that's all through the Pure Food and Drug Act. The FDA was created under Theodore Roosevelt. And finally, put limits on lumbering and created national parks. Very important. I hope you get to as many national parks as you possibly can. All right. And in this section, the fourth one will be going over the last one of this particular section. Why did the progressives feel betrayed by President Taft? And how did this affect the election of 1912? President Taft comes in after Roosevelt serves almost two full terms. As we know, Roosevelt became president, the youngest president, after McKinley was assassinated. He becomes president, serves almost full 8 years, and then doesn't want to be president anymore. So he grooms William Howard Taft. He was much different president than William Howard Taft. He was a little bit shy. He didn't like to talk to journalists or news conferences. Meanwhile, loved that stuff. So right there, he was already behind the eight ball when it came to Theodore Roosevelt. People were excited about Theodore Roosevelt. People really liked Theodore Roosevelt. Taft, on the other hand, very quiet person. Does not mean he wasn't a pretty decent president, though. He actually broke up more trusts than Theodore Roosevelt did. But why did progressives feel betrayed by President Taft? Well, Taft raised tariffs that tax on imported goods coming. All right, that will bring up the price of a lot of those imported goods. And he was accused of blocking conservation efforts when he fired a high-ranking forest official. So these two reasons are the reasons that progressives felt betrayed by President Taft. Now, how did this affect the election of 1912? Well, Roosevelt comes back, loses the Republican primary to Taft. He loses that primary to Taft because they went with the incumbent president, which is usually what happens. So Roosevelt then creates a different political party, creates the Bull Moose Party, and you have Taft, who's a Republican, and Theodore Roosevelt running through the Bull Moose Party, which is a progressive Republican, going against the Democrat, Woodrow Wilson. So Taft and Roosevelt, they split the Republican progressive votes. So Woodrow Wilson wins the election. Now, if just Taft ran against Wilson, or just Roosevelt ran against Wilson, chances are one of those Republicans beats Wilson. Wilson was a good president in his own way, actually. We're going to get more to President Wilson. All right. We're going to talk about some extra credit that I thrown in here. So, very important. And a good segue. We talked about the progressive president. A good segue into this extra credit. And a lot of kids probably know if you've heard me talk, especially this unit. Name three presidents I consider to be the three presidents of all time. So Theodore Roosevelt, we've discussed a lot. His distant cousin, Franklin Eleanor Roosevelt, brought us through the Great Depression, at the very least relieved us during the Great Depression, and then brought us through World War II, or most of World War II. He died at the very end while in office. And of course, I put Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, as part of my top three as well. Obviously, you have George Washington and Eisenhower and Woodrow Wilson. Like those were great presidents. Thomas Jefferson, the Louisiana Purchase. Those were great presidents as well. But the top three, in my personal opinion, are the two Roosevelts and Lincoln. And the other one was the name of the place I was married and what was the date. So I was married out on Long Island. My wife was from Long Island at a banquet hall called the East Wind. It was a beautiful banquet hall. It was a really nice day. And that date was July 26th, 2009. So July 26th, 2009. We've been married for over 15 years now, together for over 20. And we met in in Fairfield, Connecticut during our college years. So. All right. Three open-ended questions to round out the seven. How did changing factory conditions promote the rise of labor unions in the 1800s? Well, bosses knew there was names and meals with their families, so they were friendly toward one another. Workers then became discontent with the conditions. The skilled workers were being replaced by machines, and then they felt less valued. And you're not going to pay someone as much for working a machine as if you are stitching clothes by hand or making shoes by hand. All right? So workers became discontent with the conditions where their skills were less valued. And for that, they were paid poorly because these machines came in and replaced them. Also, the factory conditions were overcrowded, became very dangerous. The use of child labor, was still around for many more years after this, and this led to the rise of labor. All right, and we talked about the women a lot. What advances do women make in the workplace, and what problems still remain in the late 1800s. We talked about for the advances. We talked about many more women joining the labor force. All right, so many more women joined the labor force. So many more women were working, and then the International Lady Garment Workers Union. You could just ILWU in 1900 to advance women garment workers' rights. All right, this led to better wages and work hours, which will also be one of your multiple choice questions. Hint, hint. So know this, you know that multiple choice answer. Now the problems. Most women did not join labor unions because most bosses would not hire people who joined unions. They would hire people who joined unions. They were worried about, the violent strikes. Okay, so most women did not join labor unions. And then they ended up working long hours for low pay and often under unsafe working conditions. Because that other one with the advances, that was pretty much just garment workers. The ILGW, that was people who made young women who made clothes. Those were, that was a union for them. But women were in many lines of work, and they still worked in these factories for long hours, low pay, and unsafe conditions. And their demands to end child labor, they were not met. They were not met for 55 years. All right, not mid 1930s was child labor deemed illegal. So that took the Great Depression pretty much to get the adults to work and take kids out of those factories and put them in school permanently. So those were the advances and the problem. And last but not least, why did the labor movement suffer a number of defeats, major defeats after 1870? And I'm looking for 3 answers here, 4 points apiece. A series of violent strikes worried the public and led to unfavorable court decisions. So that's 1 for 4 points. The second one, most Americans and the employers often fired workers who joined unions. They opposed labor organizations. So that is the second one for another 4. Now I have 8. And then easy, depressions and recessions also led to an erratic economy. Depressions and recessions also led to an erratic economy. All right. Now, besides that, I'm not sure if you can see the light off. Let's see if I can get that back on. All right. Sorry about that. All right. So the rest of that, know a lot of people. All right. There are 8 people on the test. Not as many as the last one, but still a decent amount. You have muckrakers. You have Thomas Nass at a Tarbell, Upton Sinclair on there. You have President Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson. You had advocates for women and Black Americans like Alice Paul, Ida B. Wells, and her free speech newspaper, George Washington Carver, the King of the Peanut, and other crops. So those 8 people. We talked a little about the spoil system, Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, fire, political bosses, opportunities for women in the late 1800s, workers, the reason why workers problems that led to workers forming labor organizations, Theodore Roosevelt's Service Commission, much corruption, city government leading to all these things on the test. Women fighting for suffrage, or their right to vote. Black Americans during the Progressive Era, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and how politics shaped the Gilded Age that led to the Progressive Era. There are 8 voting reforms and amendments. Very important. You need to know how to spell them. Primary, the initiative, the referendum, and the recall. Make sure you know those 4. And then the amendments, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. Make sure you know all those amendments, voting forms. Use the COOT. Practice using the COOT, please. And then there are events you need to put into chronological order this time around. All right. So the Sherman Antitrust Act is back. All right. This is one of the only things that's on two tests. Sherman Antitrust Act. All right. Uh, no, the 19th Amendment, the Jungle, Triangle Sugar Factory Fire, and the Pendleton Act, which is also named the Wagner Act. So those are the events that you have to put into chronological order. Once again, go to the Kahoot, use the Kahoot as a good resource for that. So make sure that you are working hard, make sure that you are studying hard, and you will be in